So we're at the TIFF Bell Lightbox today. Thank you so much for doing this interview. You have a wonderful collaboration with TIFF right now called Elegant Pairings, which is pairing merchant ivory films with other films that you consider would be complementing.
I was told about it early last fall sometime, and so I said, sure, I'd love to come, and we then slowly over a month or two devised the two programs, the book to film, and then the pairings.
I love the idea of the complementing films.
It was just an idea that they had a bearing on each other in a way, and so I hope that they do.
Now, one of the ones I thought was particularly unique was having The Remains of the Day paired with Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca.
The hierarchies of servants and the fact that the whole thing was in the English, in a huge English house, which was the first experience of that kind that I'd ever had, was probably in seeing that film when I was about 12, I think.
Another one I thought was a really interesting pairing was the Europeans with The Age of Innocence.
I was surprised that when Age of Innocence came out, I was surprised that not a single critic who reviewed the film or anyone who wrote about the film remembered or saw any similarity to the Europeans, which hadn't been that much previous to The Age of Innocence when it played in New York, and it was a success. It's not like it was a film that just disappeared after a day or two. It was a success, and nobody seemed to see this connection between Edith Wharton and Henry James, and that really the two stories are virtually identical.
I was fortunate enough to grow up on Merchant Ivory films. I noticed that a lot of today's films look a lot like Merchant Ivory films. So films like The Painted Veil or the Exotic Marigold movie that just came out. Can you tell me a little bit about how you see that, how you see that in your influence in the world today? Somebody even mentioned to me the Exotic Marigold one was a Merchant Ivory film, and it wasn't. So
well, I saw that the other night, and I thought it seemed to be two Merchant Ivory films rolled into one. One was A Room with a View, and the other was Heat and Dust. They were somehow become one thing.
Could you tell me a little bit about how the style of Merchant Ivory films came together? I mean, there's a particular look and feel to your films.
Well, that was pretty accidental, but I mean, we started out in India making Indian films. I mean, films set in India and usually having a big Indian component. And then Ismail and I moved to the United States, and we started making American films. And sometimes working with Ruth, sometimes not. And then we started the series of adaptations of the Henry James novels, and then ultimately E.M. Forster. And Ruth was always with us. And but it was a hit or miss thing, because these films were interspersed with other films. I mean, we do an English film, and then we do an American film, and then we do a French film, and then we come back to something else. And it's not like there was one constant thing flowing, or one kind of style, only one style. I mean, I think things changed as the years went on, and according to where we were, there's a kind of difference. But I do admit that there is an English. There seems to be a kind of Merchant Ivory style, which is, I think, it depends on the ingredients which are in the films. A good story, a very good adult story with good characters. We've always had the best possible actors that we could afford. We've always had the best cameramen, and we've always been able to afford the best cameraman. We've always had very, very good designers. And all those things together kind of create a constant that has become a style.
You notice a lot in your films that they are character driven, and I wanted to know You know, today there's a lot of action movies and superhero movies.
Well, I don't consider those films for adults.
I wanted to know what your thoughts were on that. Is there a place for character-driven stories anymore? Like The King's Speech won huge accolades a couple of years ago, and you know, is there room for that still in the industry?
No, I think there's always a market for it. If something catches on, the most unlikely things do catch on. And one would have thought that the Marigold Hotel thing was an unlikely. Until Slumdog Millionaire, it was impossible to set a film in India and have an American audience like it. I mean, Americans were terrified they were going to see awful sights, and which would depress them, and sights of poverty and this and that, and no Indian film, including even the films of Ray's, had a large mass distribution in the United States, no matter how much the critics liked them, and there was always an audience for them, but they were never mass or seen by big audiences until Slumdog Millionaire, which had all of the things in it supposedly that Americans and probably Canadians don't want to see. And so that sort of prepared the way, I think, for Slumdog Millionaire. That sort of broke this constraint.
Merchant Ivory films are very much based on novels, or there's a lot of them that have the influence of novels. E.M. Forster and is a particular favorite of mine. I discovered E.M. Forster through Merchant Ivory films, and then went back to the source material. So I wanted to know how that came about. Was this an active decision to do novels?
Logically, the one that I would have wanted to do the most, and probably would have done, was Passage to India. And I read that, and at the period of when I was making so many films in India and going to India all the time, I read that novel and read it more than once and loved it, and always thought it would make a terrific film. But at the same time, Satyajit Ray also wanted to make it into a film, and he went to see Forster, who was still alive, and brought some films to show Forster that he had done, but Forster didn't want to, because he had this thing against anybody turning his books into films, and so he turned Ray down. And so once Ray couldn't do it, I didn't feel I should do it. You know what I mean? But at the same time, during that period, somewhere along in there, I read A Room with a View, and I thought, gosh, it would be terrific to go back to Italy, because I made my first film in Italy, and I loved Italy, and I hadn't been to Italy for 20 years because I was always in India, making films in India. So literally for 20 years, I never stepped foot in Italy. I thought it'd be terrific to go back to Italy and make a film. And Room with a View seemed to offer that opportunity. And so we were able to get the rights, and it was the first Forster book that was allowed to be made into a film.
So it was the first film.
Yeah, and then Passage to India came. Yeah, well, it was a selfish thing. I mean, I just wanted to. I thought it would be great to make a film in Italy.
What books would you still want to turn into films?
Oh, there are so many, but I know I never will. I'm going to set in all kinds of places. Right now, I'm reading a series of novels by the South African writer named Damon Galgut. Virtually every one of them would make a wonderful film, but I'm not about at my age to go off to South Africa and into the back bush or whatever it is and make movies there. But they're fabulous stories and characters and stuff, things like that. I mean, I read things all the time that I think would make a good movie.
Thank you so much for doing this with Press Plus One today.
You're welcome.
We really look forward to the Elegant Pairings event at the TIFF Lightbox.